What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Collector's Outpost. I am John, and I'm here with a special guest, Anakin Starkiller from @Stars. And all right, so now we've got two versions of the Luke V2. I've reviewed this one on the channel, which I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite versions of Luke, and you've got this one here. So let's what we got there?
Okay, so the V2, if people don't know, when they made Return of the Jedi, they were right about to start filming, and then it became apparent. Mark Hamill said, "George, why do I have the same lightsaber? You chopped my hand off at the end of the last film. Yeah. Lightsaber, did I crawl down there?" And George, oh shit, we need a new lightsaber. So what they did was they went and grabbed one of the stunt props from A New Hope, Obi-Wan's lightsaber, and just cut the blade off of it and hung it on Mark's belt. And they started filming with that stunt prop on Mark's belt. Through production, they made a couple changes. They added tape to the neck. They put a card in here instead of the bubble strip. Bubble strip was on the Obi-Wan version. By the time it showed up in Return of the Jedi, it did not have a bubble strip. Some people think it did, even in the sandstorm scenes. It did not. Instead, it was a piece of electrical a circuit board, right, that they put in there. This is a boot stud from a Hunter Wellington boot. So they're like the big giant rubber boots that you put on when it's like really, really rainy. Back in the 60s and the 50s, instead of having molded rubber grips, what they actually had were like little tiny metal studs that would stick into the bottom of it, right? And what they did, they just ripped one of those out and stuck it to cover up a hole that was there. It was originally for a wire hole.
Actually, I think that's the first time I'm hearing that.
Yeah. And then this little cone knob is actually from a very expensive record player. Like a $2,000 record player. This was a little adjustment knob, and they took it apart, and some of the parts ended up on a whole bunch of different props. On the X-Wing pilot chest piece, there's one of these. The boot stud, there's a couple other boot studs on the thermal detonator they blow up the bunker with in Return of the Jedi, so that's how these parts were discovered. But largely, this is an Obi-Wan stunt that was cast from a wooden master, and then there was some extra machining done. We knew for years that the lightsaber that you see in the close-up when Vader says, "I see you've constructed a new lightsaber," the one that showed up on the publicity material where this is all silver except for a copper neck, we knew that that's not what Mark had on his belt. We knew about the existence of these casts, and we knew that it was an Obi-Wan stunt saber in some version. But it wasn't until, I think it was like 2015, that Brandon Allinger of Prop Store revealed to like the world that he actually had Mark's original lightsaber, that he had tracked it down, and he bought it, and it was part of his collection. He showed it off at a Comic-Con. Then he posted a high-res photo of it to his Facebook page. And then he went on this TV show, something like, Treasures of Movie, and he actually had a moment where like he unified Mark Hamill with the original prop and sort of put them together, and we got some really good references there. So I set out in 2016 to make a replica of that hilt using all of the material that we knew at hand. What I had was a friend of mine who used to work in the movie industries. He's German, and he worked with somebody who had worked on A New Hope, and they'd talked about his love of Star Wars. One day the guy comes in and says, "Hey, I remember you saying how much you like Star Wars. I have this, would you like it?" And what he puts down is an original Obi-Wan Kenobi stunt saber from A New Hope. Right? So it was one of the original castings that got turned into the V2 and the V3, and that was Obi-Wan's lightsaber for all the fighting scenes for Episode 1. So he gives it to my friend Tom, and Tom has it as part of his collection. I contacted, and so we know that the V2 was based upon one of those castings.
Right.
So I contacted Tom, and I said, it would be really great if I could get some numbers from you in terms of like how long it is or how wide it
Sizes, right.
So that I can, because I could do, I had references that I could do CAD design from, but some of like the overall numbers, I was like, that would help if I just actually had some concrete numbers. So I went out on a limb and I sent him blueprints of the lightsaber with just a bunch of question marks and like, this is A, this is B, this is C. And I said, can you give me some of these dimensions? And he was good enough to take calipers to the whole thing and give me like probably 50 dimensions,
wow, that's
right?
awesome.
To get every single number
That's
right
awesome.
to the original piece. Now, when Brandon revealed that he had the original lightsaber, we learned that there were some differences about the V2 from that casting. The pommel seems to be something that was separately machined afterwards, right? And the emitter has a different construction. It's a smaller plate up here. There's also a nipple that was added. Some of the dimensions are different. So using the numbers that I had from Tom, the references that I had of the original stunt saber, and then the pictures that Brandon Ellinger posted, I was able to create a 3D model that I think pretty much accurately replicates the original saber. Roy from Wanawanga was instrumental in helping me double check that work. I sent him all the CAD models that I'd created, and then he did a bunch of overlays where he like took the model and put it on top of the pictures and showed where it matched and where it didn't. And from that, I was able to tweak some of the designs, like, you know, where the pommels should be and how large this should be and how large that should be, things like that, to really dial it in to get it 100%. He also produced a run of, this was on the RPF in a time when there weren't like the big companies right now, like TXQ, Damien Sabers or 89 really making anything. And so I made the bodies. Roman was making clamps at the time. Roy made the levers. And then Sloth Furnace made the circuit board. And we did a run on the RPF. I did a couple of them. One where it was a static saber, right? And the whole body was solid metal and these two parts came on. And the emitter spins. I don't know if you knew this, but on the original prop, right, the emitter spins.
Yeah, that was kind of what the tape was for, to try to get the.
Then I did another version of it where there was a hollow body and you could install electronics. And I actually figured out a way to allow you to install electronics while keeping the emitter spinning. Basically, what there is there's a cup inside that screws into the neck. And then this part and this part are two separate pieces that clamp around that cup.
Oh, okay.
So if you take this emitter plate off, you can get to the electronics. And there's a separate emitter plate for FXing for when you want to put the saber in. But if you want to keep it static, you can have it installed and still have all the spinning, rotating function because it's spinning around the NeoPixel things. Otherwise, it would get twisted, right? So then I produced this run. I did maybe 3 versions of it. And then my buddy Danny from Halliwax Basement Builds, who he started getting big into the prop community by basically taking the kits that I was producing and building them for people and putting in every single dent. Oh, I should say too, the stencils come from our friend Trooper Trent, who did this thing where he mapped every paint chip on it, right? And then
I was going to ask you where the stencil came from.
Yeah, stencils that you could put on it to allow you to get every single thing. When I contacted him, he had done at that point some Boba Fett decals, and I was like, can you do something like that for the lightsaber? And he's like, decals won't work, but I bet you I could do stencils. And then he created 2 different versions of the stencils. First, it was like very rudimentary, like with the references that weren't so good. And then when we got better references, he went back and just went crazy on like getting every little chip exactly like it is on the original. So we had all the parts, we had the stencils. Danny would go through and do like the acid etching. He would do things like add dents to the emitter.
I was asking who did the dents.
Yeah, the original is
Danny did these?
Yeah, there's 5 different dents here. There's dents on the bottom. Brandon described the bottom of this lightsaber as looking like somebody tried to hammer in a bunch of nails with it, right? So each one of those is meant to replicate that, but it's not just random. It's, Danny went through and like every dent is on the original. Every scratch is on the original.
That's all. So what did he use for the dents? Did he kind of like the rotary tool?
Some of them were rotary tools. Some of them he has like jigs that he's created, right? When he does the one called the Vader Slayer now, and he has like a master that he's marked up every single little dent, and then he goes back through and redoes it. Sometimes it's a chisel.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah. By the way, I will put Danny's channel, the Halliwax. What's the channel?
Halliwax Basement.
Basement. Right. Love his stuff.
He started by just doing these videos of his own assembly, and then he did instructional videos that were a great help to me because when people would contact me and be like, so how do I build your kit? I could just say, watch the video, it's already done. And then he turned into a Patreon, and now he has a Patreon where he does do some general videos on YouTube, but then if you're a member of his Patreon, which is only like $5, he does these real deep dives where he goes into all of his tips and tricks for making it look exactly like this.
Yeah, it's really cool, and he does everything like out of. Well, you've been up there. Is it a garage or a shed? He's always saying the shed.
Yep, it's a shed. Yeah, he's back in the shed. I know.
So you guys got to check it out. I'll put a link down below.
And
he's hilarious.
He's a really
great.
funny guy too. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he's the one that did all the dents and stuff on this.
And
so cool.
And this version of Luke's we call the DS2V2 because both of us have the same initials, DS. And we made some changes over my 2018 design with particularly to like the grooves that are in each one of these recesses and the way that we did some of the milling marks down here on the
some
pommel.
of these spacings a little different.
You look at every single one.
Because they all look different. Yeah, okay. So I thought it was me for a second. I'm like, they all, which is the typical Luke thing. They are.
Not only,
so, but on these.
Not only is every single one different spacing, every single one of these is a different width.
Different width.
And every cut, this is not a single plunge tool, right? Because the original was machined from wood, then cast in metal. So each one of these recesses was hand shaped. So if you look at it, and if you can get like an angle, I don't know if your camera can pick it up.
Yeah, well, I'll put an insert.
Some of them are like a narrow V, some of them are wide V, some of them have like a rounded bottom, some of them have a sharp bottom, right?
Yeah, because you think ultimately like the ideal version of it, you think, because this looks fine.
I showed
right because these are all they look even.
Yep.
But you know, like, and you think that this should be even. But I'm sitting here looking at them while you're talking. I'm like,
and they're not.
Are those off?
And they're not. Every single one is meant to be different.
Right, right.
On the Hero, they are unevenly spaced.
Yeah, and they're different thicknesses.
They're different thicknesses, but the V cut is the same because it was machined. Because it was machined on a lathe with a particular tool that just plunges, right? Whereas these ones, because of the way they wwere cut, every single angle is different.
Right, right.
I sent Danny a picture of the newest schematics of these, and just done in 2D because the machinist needs numbers, right? And this is like 100 different numbers.
Must be a nightmare.
They hate me, but I'm like, you got to. This is what we want. We want every single thing to be exactly right.
I mean, I can imagine anybody who's sitting there with a machine or like, their job is like, I'm going to set this in, and then you kind of do everything all uniform because that's, how a mind thinks. But then when you go in there and you look at it and it should be the same because these look all the same. I'm sure they're probably the same because of like the manufacturer. You think they should be the same, but then if you're giving me 1,000 different numbers, I'd probably want to shoot you myself.
Yeah,
because it throws the eye off just a little bit when you look at it.
I've had a couple shops like change my design because they're like, he can't have meant that, right? He can't mean it like it's supposed to look like that. And I was like, yeah, it does look like that. I
can imagine this call.
That's how they were made.
Did your 3-year-old put this together?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah, they don't believe me. And actually, the original one too, when they cast it, because of the technology that they had, they weren't able to cast aluminum because it was such a high thing. So this body is actually made out of welding rods. It's aluminum welding rods that melt at a lower temperature, and it's basically they just took a bunch of welding rods, threw them in a colander, melted them down, maybe with a blowtorch, then cast it. Because there's a guy on the RPF that he's actually done that. I told you that stunt saber that our friend Tom has. They actually did a metallurgical analysis of it and determined that it wasn't aluminum, and they tracked down the original alloy. It's incredibly difficult to get, but that's what it is actually. I know,
that's
it's a weird
really cool. And then from this one, didn't they cast off of that to make was it the Yuma? That one was metal?
So they cast
because I know there's a resin one that comes out of R2.
And those
were cast off
those
of this?
were cast off of the V3, which similarly descends from the Obi-Wan stunt.
Right, and we see the V3 on the battle at the end with him and Vader.
The only thing that was like freshly machined for Return of the Jedi was the fighting prop that Luke has in his hands in the Yuma shots, right, while he's on the skiff.
Right.
So that was made in America, and that's machined aluminum. And that was made for Return of the Jedi. None of the other ones were made specifically for Return of the Jedi, or they were casts of things that were made from the 77 films.
Right.
And then the Yuma was turned into the hero for the insert shots.
For the insert with Vader.
So what they did was they took that fighting stunt that they had made for Yuma, and they stripped it down, they repainted it, they put a new control box on it that has the blinking lights and the circuit board, and they used that for the insert shots of Vader, and then for the insert shots that never made it in the film of Luke constructing.
So that scene right there, that whole battle, with the first time you see the V2 coming when he's with Chewie, right? That whole scene is the perfect example of what I'm talking about. From shot to shot, the lightsaber changes.
Every single one.
And then when Vader, Palpatine, and Luke are towards the end, when that battle's about to happen, the V2 comes in.
Yep.
Right. And then when it's on, it's the 3.
Yep.
Right. And it's like, so
when it's on, it's either a 3 or a resin casting of the 3.
Right. The whole way one, when he's you built a new lightsaber, is the Yuma redone.
Yep.
So that's 1. Then you see the V2 as he hands it to Palpatine and on his chair.
Yep.
So that's a 2. And then the 3, or casting of 3 in the back. So it's like, that's what I'm saying about like consistency. Which one do you want the accuracy from?
When it first shows up, right? When it pops out of R2's head, that is a resin casting.
That's a resin one, yeah.
It's a resin casting.
And you can actually see the
V3.
seam, I think, if I remember
and
right.
It's and a chip. There's a chip in the emitter, right? It's totally flat and there's a chip.
Yeah.
When it flies out, it's resin.
Yeah.
When he catches it, it's the
2.
V2.
Yes.
When he ignites it, it's the Yuma.
Yeah.
In 10 seconds, there's 3 different lightsaber props.
So if you zoom in when Boba wraps the wire around, his hands go like this.
That's the Yuma.
Yeah, stop it for a second and zoom out. I've actually showed it on the show. It's a complete different machined control box, which doesn't even have the card on it.
Nope.
And
just choose. There's a flathead screw and a flathead screw.
Yeah. I'm hoping TXQ actually puts that version out.
I'm going to do that. That's what I'm here to talk about with you today.
Hey!
So this I released a couple of years ago. People have asked me to do more of the V2 kits. I have been reticent for a couple of reasons. One, the market for kits on their own. So what you had 5 years ago, right, is people doing aluminum kits, and then other installers that would say, like, get the crystal chamber, give it to me, I'll install it, but it's going to cost $500 or $1,000 because I have to do the electronics work, right? And so that allowed people to have lightsabers that were more accurate and more functional than anything we could have possibly imagined, but they were also prohibitively expensive.
Yes.
Right? And so then a company like 89 Sabers comes along, says, well, we'll copy the design and we'll put the electronics already in there so you don't have to do anything, right? And you can just buy them and collect them. And that's a lot of the times like what you see out there in fandom. And then TXQ followed suit with using designs by myself or my friend Laredo or some of the other guys that they work with, right? And then doing their own designs now, right? With the electronics and the inside and the aluminum outside. That has decreased the market for kits that don't have electronics because people are saying like, well, if I can buy one that is already installed, right, for $250, why would I buy this for $200 and then have to pay an installer to do the installation for $500?
Because your average 89 Sabers, $300, about $500 to $300, depending on which one. Right. So that installed.
And TXQ you can buy can buy them on AliExpress for $250, right? So it made it difficult to say like, what's the market here? Because in one way, I'm kind of competing against myself because some of the designs I've already put them up there, and then two, like I'm not an electronics guy. I'm not going to do the installs. So this is the V2 that I designed for TXQ. They contacted me. They said they wanted to do a V2. I started with the dimensions from Tom of the original Stunt Saber, but then I idealized it because things like the different...
it becomes a nightmare to manufacture.
And they're just not interested in that. They want things to look like people imagine them from the world of Star Wars, not necessarily like the original props. Right? So and originally we wanted to have this come in a more weathered finish, but they were having trouble doing the stenciling, so they just went for the sort of simplified silver and black tone with the idea that people could add weathering if they want.
Right.
In trying to figure out what the next step for me is, saying like, I want to continue to make these sort of ultra accurate kits for people, but I also understand, because I'm not an electronics guy myself, that the installation is problematic for people and can be cost prohibitive. what I've done is, by designing these for TXQ, I have created a resource for electronics kits for myself. At this point, I've done the V2, I've done a version of the Hero for them with the Book of Boba Fett saber, I've done the Obi-Wan Episode 3 saber for them, I did the Ezra saber for them. All of these have different electronics packages that TXQ has designed, and different electronic setups that they've designed. Now I'm in a position where I can contact TXQ and say, for my next run of kits, I would like to include electronics packages that are plug and play. Right? So in the fall, I'm going to be releasing a new version of this kit that's going to have all the accuracy of the original. There's actually going to be a couple tweaks that we've even made. These pommel cubes are going to be different sizes because we found that some of them were slightly larger and slightly smaller. There's a little bit difference in how this bottom is because Danny was able to see some new details on there. But the internal of this is designed to work with the electronics from TXQ. So you're going to get this aluminum saber body, and then I'm going to include the clamp card, and the clamp lever, which I designed, and that's coming from TXQ. And then you're going to get the electronics package, the SNV4 Pro with the V2, and the SNV4 with the Hero, right? And you don't have to know anything about electronics to make it work. It's just connectors that you stick together, right? So for the kit, you will unscrew these things, you will put the connector in there, you will take these parts, you will stick them together, and then you will press the button and it will light up. And you can be your own installer.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So you can have the fun of building it without the sort of frustration of building it, right?
Right.
Because they told you, like, originally it was like, you know, Roy made the levers, Roman made the clamps. And if it all came together, it was a lot of fun. But if it didn't all come together because you couldn't get the right parts, right, then it was a nightmare. Whereas this is meant to be an all-in-one, like, you know, model kit, like the greatest model kit you could have imagined as a child. Right? That you build yourself. And Danny from Halliwax Space and Builds is going to do, where it's going to come with stencils, not the same stencils as Trooper Trent. I did stencils for this one that reflect what it looked like in the throne room scene. So it's got more black on it than it does now, because this is how it looks today. But Danny's going to do a whole bunch of videos about how you do the weathering, you know, where you add the dents and everything like that. And the kit is going to be something that you can build on your own and then have as part of your collection and have a certain amount of ownership, right? Where it's not just, I bought it and put it in the shelf.
Right,
It's
I
like,
put a couple of these things together.
I'm a Jedi. I built my own lightsaber.
There you go. That's awesome. I noticed that the pommels are also just a smidge bit different. I think that it had something to do with the manufacturing.
Yeah, they did.
It was easier to cut.
Right. So what you do is you take a rotary tool, right, that's turning this way. So imagine like a flat drill, a drill with like a flat end, and you cut in like this, and then you cut it at an angle, and you cut it at another angle. Right. When when the machinist was doing these pommel cubes, he said, well, I can, instead of cutting in like this, I can cut in like that and just make this swoop. But as a result, you're going to end up with a radius.
Because that's what it looks like.
Right.
You're getting like soft corners.
So if that doesn't matter for you and you just want something to put on your shelf, that's why I designed
like little things like that, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like for me. I mean, it's you saw where it was. It was over there. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you see the other room. Everything's just on walls, man. You're 10 feet away from stuff.
And that's what I designed this because I wanted people who, I live in an apartment in New York City. I don't have a lot of space to build things.
Yeah, right.
You know, if I'm like, hey babe, can I set up an acid bath to throw lightsabers in there? She's like, no.
right.
In our railroad apartment with our 3-year-old, you can't have a bath of acid
I'm
that
telling
you're
you,
making
like,
lightsabers in.
some of these tiny, tiny little details, unless you're sitting here side by siding them, like I'm doing while you're talking, you don't notice them.
But if you're, if you're the type of collector though that like only wants a couple props, but they want to have them very, very particular, right? This will be for you.
This absolutely.
Or if you're the type of person that's like, I like building model kits, right? Like when I was a kid, my collection was models I had built for myself. You know, like the statues I had were the Horizon models. Those were, I don't know if you remember them. They were these vinyl like models of superhero characters.
I think so. I think I did a Batman one.
Yeah, they were incredibly detailed, and like you could, if you put a lot into them, they would look as good as this.
Yeah, I just did a couple of monster trucks just this weekend.
Exactly.
I love doing those things.
And there's varying levels, and also because of something like this, like you can go crazy and say like Danny does, and like say I want to make it look exactly like the original.
Yeah.
But because of the history of the prop, throw it in your mom's dishwasher, kick it down the driveway. Right? Hit it with some rattle can, and it's going to look real. It's going to look authentic because that's largely how these things were made.
Even like this. This, I mean, it's chrome, but two completely different chromes. This is like hyper polished. This looks maybe like it's a little brushed. I can see like the little rust. Is that real rust or is that?
That is real rust. Yeah,
real rust?
It's actually so the original does have that, but I actually found a clamp that had the exact same rust pattern, so I just used that.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, the original Graflex does have a polish like this. When TXQ was manufactured, so we had two options: one to go flatter or to go shinier. The reason why I said,
hey, but you can brush this down.
That's exactly it. It's 000 steel wool.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Like literally 30 seconds of just moving it around the outside and it'll look exactly like an original Graflex clamp. I did that with my Obi-Wan saber.
Right.
And I did that actually with my TXQ V2 and it looks exactly like that.
Now, how did you get this? Because these are this is like almost like an anodized or darkened versus, like this is just the same color, same aluminum straight up. Like his actually does have the slightly darker, because that was all black.
Right.
You know what I mean? So even like here, is it just paint?
So if you want to weather this one, the problem you will have is this has an anodizing coating to protect the aluminum. So if I throw this in an acid bath,
it's not going to do anything.
Nothing will happen. First, you have to strip the aluminum, strip the anodizing, which is quite difficult. And you got to use some hazardous chemicals to do it. Because this kit will come as just machined aluminum, you don't got to worry about any of that anodizing. So this was done with a couple baths of aluminum black.
Oh, okay.
But the Sabines that I showed you earlier, that weathering, I did that with a dishwasher. That's
dishwasher.
It was multiple rounds
awesome.
of pot scrubber, high heat, sanitize, and I just put it back in. And if it came out with spots, I would just hit it with some steel wool to even out the color, and I'd send it back in again until I got the darkening.
That's funny.
And you'll get multiple tones and a little bit of higher heat here and a little higher heat there, which really is what the original ones look like.
Well, that's awesome, man.
So this is my idea of how I can sort of stay in the hobby and present something that's a little bit different from what's on the market. In the fall, there's going to be two kits. There's going to be a V2, and then there's going to be another version of my Hero, right? Which will have an option for the Yuma control box if you want to set it up to do that.
So you could swap it out to the Yuma.
Or if you want to set it up as the Hero, it'll have that. It'll have the blinking lights in the triangle.
Nice.
Actually, they won't blink. They will light up, but they will not blink.
Oh, okay.
In the control box.
Right.
But again, all electronics are going to be plug and play. All the work to do to assemble it is stuff that if you can spray paint a rattle can, you can do it. You don't need any extra skills beyond that, and it'll come with all the parts. I'll show you how to brush down this to make it match that. I'll show you how to get the silver on on the tops of the cards. That'll show you how to do that. And this is where and my plan for it now is for it to come a little bit more, you've seen the boxes that I normally ship things in, just a plain white shipper. This one's going to come in like a box that looks like an AMT or an Ertl model kit from the 70s.
Box. Right, okay.
Right, so, but the design for this one is going to be like those blue and white paintings that like the 1977, the 1980s model kits came in.
Yeah.
And for the Hero, it's going to be that silver and red contrast where there's like the picture of the item leaping into like the silver background.
Okay.
So yeah, so the idea is to say this is the thing that was in the back of your model shop in 1983 that you could never have gotten as a kid, but now you can.
Right.
And it'll have all the tools for you to make the most accurate version possible, but also all the tools that if you want to build in a weekend, it's completely doable, but you and your son.
Right. So this kit is on your website?
It's not on my website right now. This one is currently being machined. I have all the electronics for TXQ. Okay. I'm having the boxes produced. So we're probably looking at I would love to have them for Halloween. So we're probably looking at maybe September. I'm going to have these up in the shop.
Well, I'll put links to the website, Instagram, socials, and everything down below in the description so you can check everything out. Dude, awesome stuff. Thank you so much for coming by, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
But anyway, thank you all for hanging out. Drop on down, hit the like, subscribe, and notification button, and I will see you all on the next video. Be safe and kind out there in the world. See ya.
Yeah, we can have the video with us with a couple beers in talking about what we really think about Superman.